right. So there was recently a Jewish leadership conference that Dan Sanner, who's a longtime Jewish Zionist who has been inside government for a long time dealing with policies of Israel, very supportive of Israel, he hosted a conversation that included Bari Weiss and Ben Shapiro, needless to say, as fanatical supporters of Israel as it gets. And there were a bunch of things that were said, some of which we analyzed last week. But there was something that Bari Weiss said in an interview that was released earlier today, in which she was explaining the kind of thing she wanted to do at CBS, the sort of thing that she thought in her new role as CBS, as the head of CBS News, would be the kind of thing that would improve corporate media, would restore faith and trust and interest in dying legacy media outlets like CBS News. And here is the video of Bari Weiss explaining her vision of what corporate media should do.
All of us see the moment that we're in. And all of us see that the choices that it feels like we have sometimes, which is Hassan Piker and Tucker Carlson or Nick Fuentes and, Andrew Tate, the kind of people that are rising in the podcast charts, those don't actually represent our values. And I don't think that they represent the values and the worldview of the vast majority of Americans. And so this is an opportunity to speak for the 75%, for the people that are on the center left and the center right that still believe in equality of opportunity, that still believe passionately in the American project, that still believe in all of the things that everyone in this room believes in, which is liberty and freedom and individual responsibility and in the most basic level, the right to know what is actually going on in the world, not the world as propagandists and ideologues imagine it to be, but what's actually going on in the world and in your community. So you can make decisions about where to send your kids to school, about where to live, and about how to vote. That used to just be normal. And the goal of what we're trying to do at CBS is to get back to that normalcy. And I feel incredibly energized and enthusiastic because I think that is where the vast majority of Americans actually are.
Well, so that articulation of that set of goals to speak into the lives of the 75%, how are you going to do that? What's your strategy for success?
So I think one of the problems is a lot of people have tried to do centrist news. I know this because I am like the target audience for those things. And the reason that they have all failed is it's like trying to force feed spinach down someone's throat, right? It's felt very like tofu, oatmeal. It's like centrist news is choosing the midpoint between every single topic. It's felt like an absence of charisma and identity. And I, as nostalgic as people might be for an era in which 30 million Americans every night watch Walter Cronkite and saw him as the voice of truth, and I understand why they're nostalgic for that. We're not going back to that. So how do you build trust in a moment of unbelievably low trust in all of our public institutions, especially the mainstream press? I don't think it's by pretending like we can go back to having a view from nowhere. I think it's about who's in the room, right? I think it's about redrawing the lines of what falls in the 40-yard lines of acceptable debate and acceptable American politics and culture. And I don't mean that in like a censorious gatekeeping way. I mean having people that are clearly identifiably on the center left and on the center right in conversation with each other. And we've been doing so much of this at the Free Press. I was in, where was I? Chicago last week, I think. I've lost all track of time, where Dana Lash, former spokeswoman from the NRA, was debating Alan Dershowitz on guns. Now, these are people that have wildly different opinions on the Second Amendment, and yet showing that they can have good faith, very passionate, very charismatic disagreement and still like each other at the end of the day, we think it's important. And so for me, it's always about the curation, like who's in the room, how are you showing centrist news not as the absence of disagreement and the absence of charisma, but explicitly charismatic and disagreeable, and yet doing it in good faith. And the other way you do it is, by being really honest with your audience. Like,
all right, so That's Bari Weiss's prescription for how to improve CBS. And I just want to make a couple of notes about that. First of all, you'll note there that every person that Bari Weiss wants to exclude from our discourse, she mentioned Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and Hassan Piker. These are all people who have one thing in common. They are critical of the state of Israel and they oppose U.S. financing of Israel. I know it's a huge coincidence. I'm just saying all the people that Bari Weiss wants to exclude from our 40-yard line of mainstream discourse all just so happen to be people who are opposed to the foreign government that Bari Weiss worships above all else. And then the people that Bari Weiss wants to include in our discourse as a way of solving the problems of our republic, and she named Alan Dershowitz and Dana Leitch, the former NSA spokeswoman, just by coincidence are all people who revere the state of Israel and want the U.S. to finance and arm the state of Israel. I know that's also just a huge coincidence. I'm just pointing out the coincidence. It's like just like it's a coincidence that the person who just bought CBS News and installed Bari Weiss as the head of it, Larry Ellison, through his son David, is the largest private donor to the Friends of the IDF. That too is a huge coincidence. So you have Bari Weiss saying, look, there are certain people I think have to be excluded from our discourse for the health of the United States. And just coincidentally, whether they're on the left or the right, they all happen to be people who are critical of Israel and don't want the U.S. funding and arming it. But then conversely, we have to include a lot of people who are going to rejuvenate and revitalize discourse and interest in corporate media. And by coincidence, those people happen to be people who love the state of Israel, have devoted themselves to supporting it, like I have, and who want the U.S. to arm and fund it. So there's that oddity, that coincidence, in terms of Bari Weiss's prescription for how to save corporate media in general, CBS in particular, and just American discourse on the whole. But then the funniest part is the example that Bari Weiss gave for how we can revitalize interest in corporate media outlets that are dying, like CBS News, is she said, we have to get really charismatic people who can debate the issues of the day in a way that is very civil. They end up being friends after they're debating, but they're really charismatic, and the debates they're having are the kinds of debates that Americans want to hear in this very responsible and representative way of 75% of the audience, of the public. And the two people she has said as her example are the kind of people that need to be re-included into corporate media discourse as a way of being so charismatic that they represent the vast majority of the great middle, is Alan Dershowitz and Dana Leitch. Now, Alan Dershowitz, of course, is a lifelong Israel fanatic. He's, I think, 84 years old. I don't really think he's the person that a lot of younger people who have stopped watching corporate media feel they're craving for as a charismatic figure to be able to watch CBS News in order to hear from again. And then Dana Leitch, I think I'm pronouncing her name wrong, and if so, I apologize. It's really not intentional. I think the reason is that she was a very big deal, like very relevant for about 6 seconds during the Obama administration. She became this new face of the NRA. She's very pretty. She walked around with all these guns all the time, attracted a lot of attention. I really haven't heard about her or from her or thought about her for a decade. The reason she's on Bari Weiss's mind is because last week, as part of this whole intra-MAGA debate over whether Tucker Carlson should have interviewed Nick Fuentes, she came out and gave this stirring speech about the importance of eliminating from right-wing and conservative politics anyone who doesn't support the state of Israel, condemning Tucker for interviewing Nick Fuentes. She interviewed some person who was a critic of Israel in a very aggressive way, saying conservative that's the only reason Bari Weiss has any interest in her. So the idea that the way you're going to revitalize interest in corporate media is by getting people like Alan Dershowitz and Dana Leitch to come and debate gun control, which is so 1990s. You know, it's like all those debates about from the 1980s and 1990s, like gun control and the death penalty. These kinds of debates that, yeah, they're still relevant and people still debate them, but like no one's craving debates on gun control. These debates have been around forever. They haven't changed at all. So anyway, that was the great example of Bari Weiss offered for how to rejuvenate interest, something that barely attracted more views than, say, just like filming a cat for about 6 seconds and just randomly throwing it on the internet would. It's almost hard to get that few views for a hour-long debate on the Free Press's page. This is something that CBS News just paid $150 million for, and it barely got over 2,000 views after being up all day. But the final point I want to make is this view that Bari Weiss has, which is, look, the problem with media is that we include too many fringe voices, people like Tucker Carlson and Hassan Piker. Tucker Carlson and Hassan Piker, no matter what you think of them, they're people who have attracted millions and millions of viewers on their own without the backing of CBS News. People who huge numbers of Americans want to watch, choose to watch. And Bari Weiss's solution for revitalizing interest in corporate media is to further narrow the views and perspectives that can be heard. What I was saying was Bari Weiss seems to be saying we need to get rid of these voices that are on the extremes, people who happen to have millions of people wanting to watch them, and instead narrow it down so that we only have people like Alan Dershowitz and Dana Leitch and other people who love and support Israel and only allow those people on. The problem with corporate media is exactly the opposite. The reason people lost faith and trust in corporate media and turned by the millions to independent media is not because corporate media was offering too wide a range of voices. It was exactly the opposite. They offer an extremely narrow range of views. People who just basically support and recite establishment dogma, who are in the establishment, like in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and that's it. And exclude all the rest of the range of opinion. As I was saying, that was President Obama's view. He was saying to the media, the House Republicans keep saying I'm some extremist. In reality, our differences are very small. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party were basically just fighting within what he called the 40-yard lines. And that's what Bari Weiss thinks should be the model for how to rejuvenate corporate media interest in CBS in particular. And that's because Bari Weiss's real mission is not to revitalize CBS News. It's to fortify this idea that the only way you have a right to be heard, the only entree into mainstream media is if your views are what she considers mainstream. And to be considered mainstream, you need to be able to love and support Israel, want the U.S. to fund and arm Israel, and want the U.S. to engage in neoconservative intervention and wars of the kind that have been the dogma of both political parties. That's what that project is really about. And there is a sense in which I do think it's important to note how dangerous it can be that Larry Ellison is buying up so many media outlets, and not so much CBS, but also Paramount and all the entertainment products that it produces that people still do watch, as well as now trying to buy Warner and Discovery that controls CNN, but also a lot of entertainment properties there. But then also let's remember he's one of the leaders of the consortium that the United States government forced TikTok to sell to. And the mission there is to reverse the trend of declining support for Israel and for wars, and to re-propagandize the American public to once again embrace what Bari Weiss wants to pretend is the views of 75% of the public in the middle, but what she actually knows is a worldview that more and more people, especially young people, are rapidly turning against. But anyway, congratulations to Bari Weiss on the smashing success of one of her first experiments in regaining audience for CBS News, a gun control debate with an 87-year-old Alan Dershowitz and some washed up former NSA spokesperson on gun control that Bari moderated, that just moments ago passed 2,000 views on YouTube. You know, it's a stepping stone. It's $150 million that CBS paid to buy the Free Press. It's not going to be an overnight success, but that's a huge amount of progress to be able to hold a debate on gun control that got imagine that, 2,000 entire people probably a good portion hate watched. Then there were people who clicked on it by accident because the algorithm showed it to them. And then there were definitely people who watched because people like myself and a few others on social media mocked it and put it online that way. So maybe on its own, organically, it would have gotten about 600 or 700 views. As I said, when I first noted it, it was about 5 hours after it was posted. It had just passed 800 people watching it. So it is pathetic and comical what Bari Weiss is up to, but it's also quite sinister as well in terms of what the real goal is. And given that she has behind her, and not just she, but a lot of other people involved in this project have behind them, the world's richest people like Larry Ellison, who will stop at nothing to re-propagandize the American public into once again loving and supporting this foreign country. It's tempting to write it off as laughable, but it's probably unwise to do so. I do think it's probably a cause that's already lost and cannot be re-won, but it's nonetheless worth keeping an eye on, and that's certainly something that we intend to do so. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.